The next thing I saw was up and to my right, there arose just an amazing, incredibly beautiful, loving ball of brilliant, living light. It seemed to be expanding larger and larger and brighter as I gazed onto it. At no time did this ball of light make me travel towards it. Instead, I just instinctively could not wait to travel towards it just by desiring to do so. The speed of travel was amazing. The closer I came towards it, the purer the love, the stronger my desire to arrive evolved, and the surrounding darkness that I told you about a moment ago was gradually going away. Midway in transit to this amazing ball of living light, my soul, or who I am and always have been, stopped dead in my tracks at the realization of, oh my gosh, I'm dying. Meanwhile, an immense level of comfort and reassurance overwhelmed my realization of my own earthly death, and I simply could not wait or delay my transit towards the amazing place of pure love and peace. So as I felt these feelings by desire, I continued onward towards the living place of light until I arrived all in. Once there, I was greeted by a number of beautiful, incredibly happy, just exuberant, colorful, iridescent souls. We each very much resembled human characteristics, although we weren't exactly alike. At that same time in my life, I had not yet experienced the earthly death of any of my relatives or best friends of any kind. So today, I still couldn't tell you who any of these souls were, but they greeted me heartily as if they'd always known me. Upon arrival to this place, it had an unmistaken familiarity. It was home. In fact, it was all of our homes. In fact, it was the place from where we had all originated. Much like when back here on Earth, you know, you come home from work each night and you cross the threshold of your doorway, you know you're home. You don't say it aloud, you just know. That's how I felt. I had been to this place before. It was comfortable, it was glorious, and my arrival was like a huge homecoming. Job well done. They were rejoicing with me. I could still see everywhere and anywhere I desired, and I too was every bit as colorful and beautiful and iridescent as each of these glorified souls were. I'm not implying that we all looked alike, because it wasn't the case. The loving pure light of this place, though, shone through each of us, and God dwelt in and among each of us and in all things in this place. There was complete absence of anything evil or dark or bad. I was able to telepathically communicate with multiple glorified souls all at once throughout my time. Such a girl thing to do, to be able to talk to so many people all at once. The other striking aspect of these glorified souls was that we each had a very heightened degree of wisdom and knowledge. In no way am I suggesting that our knowledge or wisdom was equal to that or greater than that of God himself, because that was never the case. Instead, I'm saying that our wisdom and knowledge far exceeded that of us here in the earthly realm. I greatly enjoyed my various conversations with these glorified souls in this place of pure loving wonder and joy. And meanwhile, just in general terms, I was given to know that I had the option to stay there eternally, or I could return to my earth suit below and complete the gift of life.
And it's brilliant. And the brilliance, you know, you think of brilliant light, and it kind of makes you feel like that might be too much, that I need to put on dark glasses. As brilliant as this is, your eyes are fine with it. You don't have any response to it where, you know, you want to shield yourself because it's so brilliant. But it's so gentle. And I guess that's the dichotomy, you know, it's so huge and magnificent and wondrous, and yet it's so gentle and so loving. And that's the feeling, you know, you're just stepping into this sense of unconditional love. And so from there, at the end of this beautiful, beautiful light, it starts to separate. And I'm now floating through the opening. And as I'm coming out the other end, there are 2 rows of beings in front of me, and they're dressed in monks' robes, brown monks' robes. Now, lots of people have lots of different experiences, and I think it's always set up according to what would be analogous to them, what would be a comfort for them. And for me, being 12 years in Catholic school and all of that, monks were a very gentle part of all of that, more so than priests. And so here they were in monks' robes, brown monks' robes, with the hoods up. And they're facing like this as I'm going through the center of them. And I'm just feeling this unconditional love radiating to me and through me and around me. It's like coming home. It's like coming home to a part of myself I didn't know I had. It's like coming home to myself in a way I had never experienced in life. Now, remember, I started out in trouble emotionally, not knowing where my life was going or what I was going to do. I was overwhelmed by life and terrified of making mistakes and, not having the tools and not having support and all of that. And here I am, absolutely enraptured. I felt feelings that I had never felt even as a child, as a newborn with my mother. I felt cherished in a deeper way than I knew you could experience. I felt like everything was right and all right, and that nothing mattered except being in the present of this experience and in this feeling. And all of this information that came in this moment of being there, when you cross over, you're privy to all of the universal information. You might not retain it when you come back, but you are there in it in that moment. You are connected to all there is and all that is. And I was so grateful to be there. And as I got closer to the front of this group of men, the one on the left stepped forward and he started to speak to me. And when I say speak, it wasn't articulation. It was as if we were speaking inside of each other. And there was no effort to it. It was just communication. It was just normal communication. And he stepped forward to me, and when I looked into his face, there wasn't one. The hood was empty. It was all energy. It was all black energy. But it wasn't scary. It was normal. It felt totally normal. I could feel him. I could experience him. And I say him because he had all of the wonderful masculine qualities of being in charge, taking care, protection, all of that, and love. And he said to me, and I want to say he looked at me and said to me, and he did. I mean, even though there were no eyes and no face, that was the sensation. And he said to me, "You cannot stay. It's not your time." And I said, "I just came home. I just found everything I had ever wanted in my whole life in connection. I've just experienced it." And he said, "It's not your time. You cannot stay."
This feeling was just this exhilarating euphoria. I felt so happy to be home. And I was flying through this star-filled realm, and it felt like there was a cool breeze flowing through me. And somebody was pouring honey all through my brain, and it was running through all my nerves, and I was exuberant. And I couldn't stop thinking, how did I forget who I really was? How in the world? It was such an incredible trick that I was in this body and I was this person, because I was no longer Bill Letson. I really wanted nothing to do with his whole story and his whole life, even though it had been a dream life. So I was flying along, and I was really thinking that was quite a trick, that I forgot who I really was, and all of a sudden I landed in a place, and it was a solid place. It had indirect lighting. There were tables there, and there were like beds and stuff. It was very clinical, institutional almost, and there were beings there. There were these 3 robed guys, and they were overjoyed to see me. They were kidding around, and they were bouncing around, and I had known them forever. And there was another guy, and he was in charge, kind of, and he was this tall, wispy guy. And when he came near me, the love from this being was so amazing, I felt like I was going to burst into tears at any moment. It was, your chest was just going to explode with love. And the 3 guys kept asking me questions. They kept saying, how was it? What can you tell us? What did you learn? And they were giggling and stuff, and one of them turned to the others, because I was very confused. And one of them turned and laughed and said, he doesn't remember us. And they giggled some more, and it was quite entertaining. It was like I was home with my best friends, and they were having a good laugh at my expense. And so I was there for a while, and it wasn't very organized. There wasn't anything going on. I think it was just a quick show and tell for me to see what was really out there, and then I was to go back. And they told, at one point I asked them, go through a review of my life, and that was, nobody cared. I told a few stories, and they didn't really care. It was like, this is a big joke. This life is a big joke, and I'm not giving it, downplaying it or anything. It's, we take it so seriously, and it seems so real, and where we're going, where we come from, is so different. It's so light, and it's full of love, every living thing.
I was traveling through what looked like deep space, moving past light that was blurring by at, as you had described, breakneck speed. And in the distance, I was seeing a giant light, but about that time, I recognized that I was not traveling alone. It seemed like it was coming from my body, a light beam, in a sense, illuminating from me, illuminating my pathway. And the pathway that I was in was not a tunnel. It was a narrow beam of light illuminated by something coming from within me, about twice the width of my body, arms stretched out. And if I may say, this story has not evolved. This is the same story that occurred in 1970 when I had my memory come back. Right. It hasn't changed a bit. But I noticed behind me, to my left and right, 2 angelic beings that were masculine but not clearly male, and they wore white seamless robes that were woven with silver threads. This is hard for me to talk about. It's impossible to prove, but one thing I can say is I've never been the same. My life has always beat on a different drum, and it's because of this experience that we're talking about. But anyway, these are masculine, golden toned skin beings that were clearly delighted to be escorting me into this wonderland, so to speak. Their hair was almost white, or it was the light coming from the heaven or where God was. And I didn't even have to look behind me to see them. My vision had been extremely enhanced, and I could literally see their faces without moving my head. And yet, I couldn't see completely behind me until I just moved a tad, just a little bit. And then my vision could pick up everything. But it didn't take long to start recognizing in the distance, as I'm moving at a hugely fast speed, this huge ball of light. and it looked white at first, only white. But I was moving to it, and it's getting closer and closer and bigger and bigger. The light was not painful to look at. It should have been, because it was brighter than the sun. But something had changed in my eyes, or something had changed in the light. But I could look at this, and all it did was invite me in, and it was warm and inviting. And everything started changing, but I could see in front of this light, where it went upward and outward in every direction, millions upon millions of people and angelic beings worshiping and praising God. But this wasn't like they had to. It wasn't like they were required to fulfill some duty. This was an expression of who they were and what they were created to be. And there was an angelic being to the right of the door, but of the gate there. But what really impacted me, to this day, still does, is to my left, all of a sudden, I was able to, it was time to focus on this gathering of group of people that had arrived and were just arriving.
They were there to meet you. That's the sense you had.
It was clear that they had come to meet me, come to greet me, and they were just getting there. I mean, some had already been there, but not everyone. It was just it was as if the timing was perfect. Not that they had been waiting there for a million years, right. But they had just gathered there. It seemed like they were orchestrated to be there by the music. And when I finally focused, they were all in place. And as I looked around, of course, I've never felt so loved. I've never felt so accepted in my life. I've never felt so one with anybody. And yet, when I looked into faces, no one was recognizable as family or ancestors, or there seemed to be nobody that I knew. And yet, it's kind of like you and I right now. I've never met you until just an hour ago. But you and I are like one. We have this oneness in the Lord. And multiply this by 100,000 or whatever.
And you mentioned in the book that they all appeared, they weren't old, they weren't real young, but they were all about 30, early 30s in age, as you estimated it. All looking very healthy and happy. And you described the unbelievable energy that you had and that they had, the sense of vitality. Yeah, like out of heaven comes life and love and light. And it's all connected, and it's all interrelated. And this, I felt like I could accomplish anything. And I had so much strength and so much power. It wasn't needed, but it was there. And there was such vibrance and energy. But what kind of knocked my socks off was that these persons were clearly of different nations and tribes, basically racial differences, but who cared? Nobody cared. They were definitely male and female, sorry, but who cared? Because all that mattered was their spirit. And we were one in that same spirit. And everything led to the light. Everything was immersed with love, and it all led to God.
Then just started raising up. I went through the hospital. I did not see a light. I did not go through a tunnel. I actually went through the top of the hospital, and I could see Earth. I could see everything. I could see the lights. I could see buildings. I could see houses. And it was almost like I took my attention somewhere else. And I was, to the best way that I could describe it, I was home. So I was standing, floating, I don't know what you want to call it. I want to say I was standing, but I doubt that I was standing in front of what looked to be a playground. And I saw all these children, and they were playing some kind of a schoolyard game, and you could hear all the kids screaming and laughing. And as I looked at them, I realized that they were changing from the way that they looked here on Earth to these little soul lights. They were just buzzing around, and as I looked at them and they looked back at me, I knew what their name was and what they had died from. And I just was there smiling, and I felt so good, and you just could feel all this love and acceptance, and they were so happy. Nobody was saying, oh, I died down on Earth and now I'm here. It was just like, we're all home and we're playing and we're having this great time. And at that moment, I felt this, it almost felt like a hand on my shoulder, and everything stopped. I focused my attention to that hand, and what I got was, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. You need to come with me. So I left that area and was directed to go to, I think at that point, to my board. But on my way, I was shown a room that had a soul in it. And the room was filled with really beautiful golden light, and it was filled with nothing but this love that we don't feel here on Earth. It's an all accepting, all beautiful. And my impression was this soul was kind of sitting, and he was kind of slouched over, and what I was shown was that he had done really bad things on Earth, and his soul was being conditioned and given love, and they were trying to help him to get through what he had done down here.
Do you have any sense of why you were shown that? I mean, why you were able to see that?
I've thought about that question many of times, because why would I be shown something like that? I think that I was shown that so I could help. When you're here on Earth, people are always wondering, why are we here? What is our purpose? And you hear different people say, well, we're supposed to love each other. And that truly is the case, but it's a type of love that we humans don't really experience all that often. And I personally believe, after seeing what I saw in my near-death experience, that when we die, we don't go to hell. We kind of live in hell. And when we die, we aren't judged by others, and that I need to be more accepting and loving towards other people also. So I think that I was shown that so I could get an idea of what that real unconditional love is.
So I allowed myself to bathe in this beautiful light. And it was pretty much at this point that I felt the presence of somebody near me. So I lifted my head slightly and I looked, and there was a person stood just at my feet, just to the right of me, and with this white blonde hair and this skin that was like glowing light from within. I felt like I'd known this person. I thought, I know you. I actually spoke and I said, who are you? I know you, don't I? I know who you are, but I can't figure it, And this being just kept looking back. This being, I say a being because it was neither male nor female, so a total androgynous sort of look. He or she just kept smiling back at me, reassuringly as well. And I felt safe, and I felt like I was being guarded by this person. So I decided to lay back and put my head back and just bask in this glory. And after a bit, I felt the presence of somebody else had arrived. So again, I lifted my head, and there were two female forms either side of me. And they got their hands over my body. They were kind of like just slowly hovering their hands over my body. I felt the energy that was coming from their hands was just really powerful. It was like I felt love coming from their hands, actually. And it was causing like a vibration to go throughout my body. that was just sending this energy throughout, you know, and they were healing my body, but not only my body and the physical wounds that I'd just been through, but I felt like my soul was being healed as well. I felt like all the years of baggage that I've been carrying with me that I talked about earlier, all the feelings of guilt and shame and all those things were just being slowly peeled off one by one, and they were just getting down to the pure essence of my soul and healing that. So it was a wonderful feeling. I'd never felt like that before in my life. I'd never reached that point ever or come anywhere close to it. So I decided just to accept what was happening and just allow all this love to keep coming through.
I was my consciousness. I wasn't a physical body. I was like an energy body. And I was in an area that wasn't like a solid room, but it was some sort of a space that actually had an opening that would that the door would kind of open and close and let more of these beings in. And that was kind of the fun part, is in this area where I was in this time, I was surrounded by thousands of little bodies. And in my mind, my memory was they were like little fairy godmothers. They were like little bees, little fairy godmother bees humming around, thousands of them. And this door that would open would let more come in, and then it would shut and more would come in. And I was surrounded by these beings, and it was just a very loving feeling. But the most memorable was that there was a hum or a thrum or a vibration or a sound. And I called these guys my little healing buddies. And the thing that was so comical about them was that while they were healing me, they were also visiting with each other. It was like, hey, haven't seen you since the last healing. How have you been? So there was this excitement and thrum and energy and vibration, and it was just a really loving way.
So I found myself kind of standing on a stage, maybe 15 or 20 feet across, and surrounded by thousands of beings who appeared to me as, they looked human, but they looked like they were made of light, and they were wearing kind of robes, and I was, they were kind of arrayed all around me as if I were in a stadium. And I just started downloading information to them. So I knew exactly where I was, and I knew exactly what I was doing. And I didn't even think twice, hey, you know, aren't I supposed to be in the truck? It just didn't even occur to me. I seemed to know exactly what I was doing. It wasn't verbal. It was all just through thought. And it was really, you know, since I wrote the book, sometimes I think back on this and I think it wasn't really even thought. It was almost like taking a whole concept and giving it to them through the power of intention. It was very, very detailed and very layered. You know, I don't think that I could even unpack it, you know, in my conscious mind right now, because it's just so vast. Yeah. Our human minds can't really take all that in.
And I actually felt really amazing. I felt really light and free, and for the first time I felt healed and well. It was like all the pain had gone. All the fear and everything I'd been dealing with was just gone. And I just felt incredible. And I felt as though I was surrounded by beings that were taking care of me, but I also felt that I was just loved, unconditionally loved. And it was the first time I had felt this way in my entire life. And words can't even begin to do it justice to this experience, because it was like, for the first time, I didn't have to work at being loved. I didn't feel as though I had to do anything to deserve it or be worthy of it. I was just loved just because I existed.
Everything was so surreal. And I also felt as though something was attached to my solar plexus, and as though I was being vacuumed into this tunnel. I could see people that I recognized, relatives and friends and family that were greeting me at this tunnel. And I remember seeing my 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Bellamy, but not the Mrs. Bellamy that I knew in school, but a younger version of Mrs. Bellamy, someone very happy and someone trim, someone pretty, as opposed to this woman that I remember in school as being frumpy probably. It seemed like something happened in her life, that she just lost that zest for life. It was as though she was just on a pause moment going through life. And that's what I remember seeing her. But here was this young woman full of life and energy, and she greeted me.
But for me, I was immediately in a bright place talking to a beautiful lady who looked like Glinda the Good Witch of the East in The Wizard of Oz. She was just lovely and very friendly. And I wasn't 2 anymore. I was a person, maybe 6 or 8, but I had full ability to express myself verbally. So we talked. I remember I said, it's harder down there than I remembered. And then I had a realization that my father would be devastated if I didn't go back.
And I got up so high that all of a sudden the world was like a blue marble, like you see when the space shuttle takes off. And I was, wow, this is great. And then I realized, I don't know where I'm going because I'm going backwards. So I flipped over and the Milky Way was a couple feet in front of me. And I decided I didn't know where I was going, so I had to ask a question: where do I need to go? And I looked at all the stars, and I saw one fairly faint but medium-sized star, and I thought, that's where I need to go. I just instinctively knew. You ask a question and you, boom, you're there. It was instantaneous. And as I was entering what I call the tunnel of light, people were greeting me, and some of the people were still alive on Earth, but they were there greeting me, and along with people who had passed to the other side. They were welcoming me. There was music playing, and I didn't care. I just had this drive to get to the light, the source, the power, which was totally blinding light, yet I could look at it.
It was happening in that moment. Everyone and everything was very clear and in focus, but it did feel like I was a little bit detached from it. And as I was taking all of that in, I started to very gently, very slowly start floating up and backwards. And everything that I was looking at started to become smaller. I felt that I was looking down at the hospital, and I saw these little balls of energy buzzing all around. Those were souls that I was seeing, and they were all connected by this very thin, iridescent line. The way that a spider web looks if you catch it just right in the sunlight. That's what it looked like, which I now realize is oneness and the way that we are all connected. And I remembered the way that these souls were buzzing around didn't make sense to me, because I thought, why are they all running around like that? I didn't understand why they were all so busy.
All of a sudden, there was total darkness. I mean, darker than you can ever imagine. If I'm dead, I shouldn't be aware of this total darkness. It was getting lighter and lighter. Then the next thing I knew, I was on the edge of what I thought was a cliff. First thing I noticed was the vertical and horizontal river of white and gold. And it was just flowing. And the warmth, and I could see little gold domes on the other side, and I'm thinking, I gotta get on, that's where I gotta go. I gotta go there. And as I looked down, there was an endless pit, and it was grayish blue, but you couldn't see the bottom. And when I looked to my left, I could see the greenest green, and I'm guessing it's grass, and the bluest blue. And as I'm sitting there, I could see two columns with stairs in between them. And there was a gentleman sitting on those stairs, and he had his right foot 2 steps down and his left foot completely extended. I mean, straight out. And he had something in his hand, and he had a robe on, and he had long brown hair that came to his shoulders, And I noticed that I could see objects in the distance, and when I did, energy, like, just shoot out. But I also noticed right away that I had no body. No arms, no legs. It was like my third eye was it. But I felt like I had a body. I felt like I could reach out and walk and do whatever, but I couldn't move from that spot. And I focused on that river, and I tried to figure out how I can get over there. And I knew that this guy over on the right of me was my key to get over there, that I had to work with him to get over there. And when I started to focus on him, the next thing I knew, I was in ICU.
The other important thing that I want to mention is I never had a single thought of Earth and life. Not one single thought was in my head. And as I was walking in this plane, I felt as though these gentlemen would mention people that I would know. They would mention their names, or they would mention names of people that I had heard of before. And I never thought of those people as people I knew on Earth and remembered living with them on Earth. I always knew of them only in our heavenly plane. And there wasn't a beginning to me knowing them, and there wasn't like a... It was just kind of like I always have known them, and I knew them more as a brother or a sister, not as like a friend, not as like a mother or dad or anything like that. So I thought that that was really interesting as well.
And the next thing I know, I am surrounded in a white light with some blues, golden white light with some hints of blue in it, which is beautiful. And I felt completely at ease. In fact, I've never felt so at ease in my life. I'm a regular meditator, decades, closing on 40 years of meditation. I have many mystical experiences, but nothing like this. I was so happy. I was realizing that I wasn't unconscious, but I wasn't conscious. I mean, I wasn't conscious like earth conscious, different conscious. I felt presence around me. To the distance, in the white light, I saw a little boy writing something down, had his back to me, laying on the ground, very contently writing. And as I moved toward him, but not walking, just moved toward him, felt presence again all around me, wonderful feeling. It was complete ease. There was no burden about anything. And I realized where I was, and I was ready to go. And I was so happy to leave. And I realized there were millions or billions of people, presences ready to receive me, which I was very happy to go. And then I had choices. I could leave, I could come back paralyzed. I saw a tube, and I was a quadriplegic. Didn't want to do that. Nothing wrong with that, but not for me. And I could go back and heal. And so I chose to heal. And the next thing I know, I am back to consciousness.
And I was traveling, and I remember almost like I was just standing upright and moving toward this light. I saw this light down there. It was like, it was a doorway, and there was someone standing in it. And as I got closer, I saw this guy with long hair and long beard, and his skin was almost like porcelain. You know, it was really, really white. And as I traveled up at him, his skin color kept changing. It went from white to black to white to black, and it did that over and over, changing like all the skin colors of humans, you know, like all of us. And that was kind of one of my thoughts was, you know, I always wondered, you know, if there is a God and stuff, why are we different colors, skin colors, and, you know, and so on. I mean, I know the science part of it, you know, I was just curious why, if it was just, you know, if God did it, why are we different colors, you know? And anyway, then his skin went, he turned gold, and his face opened up, and white light came out of it. And then he broke away, and he was just light. And I heard the most beautiful sound coming out around him. It wasn't music, it was just sound. It was, I don't even know how to explain it. It was just beautiful. And it like went through me. I remember almost like I was being drawn in by it. And behind him were a bunch of people standing in a half circle. And I remember everybody, there was a bunch of people like really, really close. And then as I got closer, because it was quite a ways away. It was almost like maybe 80 yards or something. I don't know if I'm right on that, but it felt like it was forever. I was coming up on it. And as I got there, and I saw this, there were actually people with wings. And I know how this sounds. I used to make fun of the stories like this. I was like, yeah, right, jackass, people with wings. That's a good one. And typical, Jesus look-alike thing, and so I remember just being, I knew I was dead, and I was like, and then he stuck his hand out for me, and here I am not really believing in God and anything, and then he sticks his hand out for me, and anyway, I was like, no, please, don't take me. But I could hear him talking to me and through his mind, not like he wasn't speaking, but I could hear him. And the light that came around him too was, it was beautiful inside there. It was really like a soft white light, it wasn't bright to hurt your eyes or anything like that, but it was similar to the light that came out of his face, like when his face broke up and he was just light. Yeah, anyway, it's a weird ass story. He was trying to take me. I said, please don't take me. I gotta take care of my family. I gotta make sure they're okay. And I remember him smiling, and he leaned his head and nodded at me. He called me by another name. I don't know. I still can't pronounce it. I can't say it. I don't know why. It seems like it's right there. And then he called me by another name, or by that name. Then he calls me Willy, he was like, I'll see you in quite a while, Willy. And then, I remember, I had no pain there. There was nothing wrong with me there. And then all of a sudden I was back in my body, and I was laying on the ground in a lot of freaking pain.
But the next thing I know, I was drifting through this mist, standing upright, drifting through this mist, and all around me in the mist would have been about maybe half a dozen other souls moving in the mist, and all slowly moving up. And I remember thinking, this is so wonderful. I was so happy. I was going home. I knew I was going home. It was the most wonderful feeling. Utopia, I suppose you could say it, but if you've ever held a newborn baby in your arms and you get that feeling of love, well, you increase that by 10 times, and that's the energy that was inside this beautiful white mist. This overwhelming energy and excitement about going home. I didn't even give another thought to what was happening down on earth. Didn't even enter my mind for a moment. I was just focused on going home. And then next thing you know, I was inside this really bright white light, really opaque bluey white light. And then this woman appeared. Bing, just like that, she appeared. And she would have been, I don't know, maybe 5'6", and she had this long blue gown on. I guess almost like a sapphire blue gown on. And she had this white head scarf over her head down. It was quite long, went past her hips. And she had her hands here between her breasts in a prayer position. And she had always kept her head bowed like that, and she had long, straight, glossy black hair down to her waist. And she spoke to me telepathically. She never moved her lips once, and she said, "Go to the right, there is something we want you to do." And bing, I was there. And I can remember this sort of apricot coloured glow around everything. And there was a man there, and he had quite scruffy, long black hair, wiry black hair, and a bushy beard. I guess he looked about maybe in his 50s, short, sort of stocky guy. And then there was a tall guy next to him that looked a bit like Abraham Lincoln, tall, skinny guy with a top hat. And next thing you know, I was walking. The bushy man with the bushy beard said something. I don't know what he said because I don't remember, because we're not meant to remember. The next thing I was walking along a stream, and there through some silver birches, lovely white bark silver birch trees, and we're walking through a stream, and all the flowers that were like daisies and marigolds that were growing in the meadow around us all glowed from the inside out. So down here on this earth, the light reflects off flowers. Were there, the flowers radiated the light from within them. And it was absolutely stunning. So I'm walking with him, and he was talking to me, and he was showing me different events in my life. And I don't actually remember what they were, but I do remember at one point saying to him, oh no, I would never do that. Obviously I did. So anyway, we're walking there, and he talked to me for quite a while, and then I don't know what else happened, but oh yes, I do, yes, that's right. And then from there I suddenly found myself alone in this, like a village. It had like white marble road and white marble walls, and there was a white marble, like they looked like little shops or something on one side. There's quite a lot of busyness and people moving around, no vehicles or anything. And there were dogs, and cats, I could see them all. And then there was a building that looked a bit like, I suppose, a Greek building, very square with these pillars in the front. And I knew that I had to walk up these stairs. So I walked up the stairs, and the doors, which would have been, I don't know, 15 feet, 20 foot high, they were huge, just opened up. And inside there was a glow, this misty glow, and on both sides was like a library. There was all these shelves with, I guess, books on them. And I'm walking down there. I just knew to keep walking, and then they would tell me when to stop. And I knew that I was going to find the book of my life. My whole soul record, it was all there, and I was going down and down and down to retrieve it, to read it, which I must have done because I don't remember anything. Next thing you know, there's a lot of tables. I'm standing looking at these people. They had these like almost like picnic tables, and there was all these women and men, and they were making cloth. And the ladies picked up the cloth, and they would hold it up, and it was just like a white cloth. And then when they turned it around, it was invisible, like an invisible shield. And when they turned it back, it was a white cloth. And they were making this just by hand, very happy, very content. And the thing that I felt when I was there is I knew them all. I knew every single one of those people by their soul. They were friends. Every one of them was my friend. I knew them all from a long time ago because I recognised their light, their soul inside of them. And it was wonderful to be amongst all these friends and people that loved and cared for you, and that's the feeling you get the whole time that you're there. You feel like you're amongst all these people that love and care, and you know that you're one. You are all connected to the one source. They were no different than you, they were no greater than you, they had no different skills than you. We were all part of the same consciousness, like a clothesline, and we were all just hanging off that clothesline, all connected to the same thread. And we were all exactly the same thing. We were all pieces of the same thing. It was just incredible. And I remember a friend of mine's husband, and he'd passed away in his 30s, and he was there. He came up and he spoke to me. and we sat on the picnic table and we talked. And it was just, I don't know what we talked about. I can't remember what we talked about, but I remember talking with him. And it was so, I don't know, it was like, it was going home. It truly is going home. Anyway, next thing you know, bang, I was back in this white opaque light. And I heard the lady's voice, but I didn't see her this time. And she said, "You've got to go back now." And I said, "No, I don't want to go back. This is home, so why do I have to go back there?" I had no connection to that earth at all. So she opened up like a hole, about the size of a big beach ball. And I looked down, and I would have been probably not much higher than the power lines. That's where I was. And I could see my body laying down on the ground below me, just laying there, just as I was dressed when I went up. And I looked down at it, and I remember saying to her, "Do I live in that?" Because I had no emotional connection to that suit of armour, that skin shell at all. Nothing at all. It meant absolutely nothing to me at all. I just said, do I live in that? And then there was this whoosh sound, and then that clunk, and it was like somebody had hit me across the head with a bit of 4x2 piece of wood. Oh, my head ached, and I woke up, and I was, of course, back in my body. And I was okay, life was okay, and I remember feeling really disappointed that I was back, because I really didn't want to be there, because I know now what love is, and I know that this is a temporary existence, and we're here to learn things and to teach others, and then we'll go home.